He gaslit me for 4 years. The day I left, he told everyone I was crazy. Then his next girlfriend called me. I want to tell you about the moment I understood I was not crazy. It was a Tuesday evening in April, 8 months after I had left. I was in my apartment in Minneapolis, Minnesota. A new apartment, mine entirely. Chosen by me and furnished by me and organized according to a system that made sense to exactly one person, which was me. I was making dinner and listening to music and doing the ordinary things of a life that had taken me 4 years and one very difficult departure to get back to. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Is this Nadia?" The voice was young and slightly unsteady, like someone who had rehearsed the beginning of a conversation and was now inside it and finding it harder than the rehearsal. "My name is Zoe. I've been dating Ryan for 6 months. And I think the same things that happened to you are happening to me." I sat down. "How do you know about me?" I asked. "Because he told me about you," she said. "He said you were unstable, that you had mental health issues, that you made things up and couldn't be trusted. He said you were the reason the relationship failed." A pause. "He says all of that, but the things he says you did, I've been looking at them and I think they're the things he did. To you and now to me." I had spent 4 years being told my perceptions were wrong. I had spent 8 months after leaving rebuilding the ability to trust what I saw and heard and felt. I had spent a very long time wondering if the version of me that Ryan had described to our friends was the real one. In the 3 seconds after Zoe finished speaking, something settled in me that had been unsettled for 4 years and 8 months. I was not crazy. I had never been crazy, and Ryan had just made the last mistake he was going to make. "My name is Nadia. I am 32 years old, and what I'm about to tell you is the story of what 2 women did when they finally compared notes, and what happened to the man who had been counting on them never getting the chance. Subscribe and stay with me, because what Zoe and I built in the weeks after that phone call is something Ryan absolutely did not see coming." Let me tell you about Ryan Mercer. He was 35, a marketing director at a mid-sized software company in Minneapolis. Tall, well-dressed, the kind of man who moved through the world with a confidence that felt, at first, like security. He was charming in the specific way of someone who has learned to read people quickly and give them exactly what they need to feel comfortable, the right question at the right moment, the laugh that arrives exactly when the tension needs releasing, the memory for details that makes you feel seen. He was also, I understand now, with a clarity I did not have while I was inside it, one of the most skilled manipulators I have ever encountered. I met him at a work conference in the fall of 6 years ago. I was 26, a UX researcher at a healthcare tech company, and I was there for a panel discussion on user behavior. Ryan was in marketing for a different company, attending the same conference. We ended up at the same table at the networking dinner, and he spent 2 hours asking me questions about my work with the genuine curiosity of someone who found the subject actually interesting. I was not easy to impress. I want to say that because it matters. I had a good instinct for performance, and I was generally good at detecting when someone's interest was instrumental rather than real. Ryan's interest felt real. It was one of the things that made what followed so effective. We dated for 6 months before I knew something was wrong. The wrongness was not dramatic. It never was with Ryan. It was quiet and incremental and deniable. The kind of erosion that happens so slowly you don't notice the ground changing under you until you are somewhere very different from where you started. The first thing he did was establish himself as the authority on reality. It started with small things. I would remember a conversation differently than he did. Not on important matters, on nothing matters, on the kind of exchanges that have no stakes and no reason to be misremembered. He would tell me what we had said, and I would say I remembered it differently, and he would look at me with patient concern and explain that this happened sometimes, that I tended to misremember things when I was stressed or tired, that it wasn't a problem, but I should probably be aware of it. He said this so consistently, so gently, so without apparent malice, that I began to believe it. I began to preface my own memories with qualifications. I might be misremembering, and correct me if I'm wrong, and the specific language of someone who has been trained to doubt their own account. This is what gaslighting actually looks like, not the dramatic movie version of someone being told they are insane. The quiet, patient, consistent replacement of your own perception with someone else's until you can no longer tell the difference between what you know and what you've been told. By year 2, I was second-guessing everything. By year 3, I had stopped raising things I had observed because the process of having Ryan explain why I had misobserved them was more exhausting than the silence. By year 4, I had friends who said they were worried about me, and Ryan had explanations for their worry too. I was going through something, he said. I needed support. He was concerned. He loved me, and it was hard to watch. What he was actually doing, I understand now, was building a case, a dossier of concerned friends and documented misperceptions and expressions of patient love that would serve him very well when I finally left and he needed a version of events that made him the devoted partner and me, the unstable one. I left in August 2 years ago. The leaving itself is its own story. The specific accumulation of clarity that builds when you finally stop trying to make the relationship work and start paying attention to what the relationship actually is. I will say only this. I left, and I did not look back, and the weeks after the leaving were the most disorienting and the most clarifying of my life. Drop a fire emoji if you know the specific exhaustion of being told your perceptions are wrong so many times you stop trusting them. Because what happened after I left is where the story really begins. The day I moved out, Ryan was very calm. That is the thing I remember most clearly. He helped me carry boxes. He spoke reasonably. He said he was devastated, but he understood. He said he hoped I would get the help I needed. The help I needed. As if the years of living inside his constructed reality had been a symptom of my malfunction rather than his engineering. I did not understand, in that moment, what was coming. I had been so focused on the leaving, on the logistics of extracting a life from an apartment and a relationship, that I had not thought far enough ahead to consider what Ryan would do with the narrative once I was gone. He moved fast. I will give him that. Within 2 weeks of my departure, the version of events had been distributed to our shared social circle with the specific efficiency of someone who had been preparing for this moment. I heard it in fragments from different people over the following weeks. The accounts varied in detail but converged on the same essential story. Nadia had been struggling. Ryan had been worried. He had tried everything. In the end, there was nothing more he could do. Some people believed him. Those people were not, I eventually understood, people who had known me well enough to test the story against their own experience of me. They were people who had known me through Ryan, whose version of me they had received from the beginning through his characterization. He had spent 4 years building that pipeline, and he used it efficiently. The people who knew me well, my close friends, my family, the colleagues who had worked alongside me for years, were not fooled. But the people in the middle, the social acquaintances and professional contacts who occupied the overlapping circles of a shared life, were presented with a version of events that had been constructed with considerable skill and delivered before I had the language or the distance to counter it. I spent the first 8 months after leaving rebuilding, not dramatically. I did not move cities or change jobs or perform a reinvention. I went to therapy. I worked. I rebuilt the specific trust in my own perceptions that 4 years of consistent undermining had eroded. I talked to the people who had seen what I had seen and let their confirmation do what confirmation does. I did not think much about Ryan during those 8 months. I thought about the version of myself that had existed before him and the version I was trying to get back to and the distance between them. Ryan was the context, not the subject. And then Zoe called. Stay with me, because what Zoe told me in that first conversation set off something I had not known I was waiting for. Zoe was 28. She had been with Ryan for 6 months, which meant he had started dating her approximately 2 months after I left. She had met him at a mutual friend's party, the mutual friend being someone who existed in the overlapping social circles of Minneapolis's mid-sized professional world. She had heard about me, as I said, Ryan's version of me, the unstable ex, the one who couldn't be trusted, the one he had tried to help and failed. She had accepted this account without particular skepticism because she had no reason to question it, and because Ryan, in the early months of their relationship, had been exactly what he always was in the early months: attentive, curious, present in the ways that build trust. The cracks had started appearing around month 4. Small things at first. She remembered a conversation differently than he did. He explained patiently that she tended to misremember things when she was anxious. He said it gently. He said it with concern. She had heard this before, not from her own life, but from what Ryan had told her about me. Nadia used to misremember things, he had said, more than once, in the context of explaining why the relationship had been difficult. It's hard when you can't trust someone's account of their own experience. When he said the same thing to Zoe about Zoe, when her memories became unreliable, when her perceptions became suspect, when the patient-concerned explanation became the standard response to any discrepancy. She had a reference point that I had not had. She recognized the pattern, and the recognition had led her, after several weeks of thinking about it, to find me. We talked for 3 hours the first night. She told me what had been happening, and I listened, and the specific thing I felt was not triumph. It was sorrow, the particular grief of hearing something familiar described by someone else, and understanding that it was not, as you had been told, unique to your dysfunction. It was a method. It had been applied before. It was being applied again. He told me you were crazy, Zoe said at one point. He said it a lot, actually. Like a warning. Like he was telling me so I'd know what to do if you ever contacted me. He said that, I said. He said you might try to reach out, that if you did, I shouldn't believe anything you said. He prepared for this. Yes, she said. He prepared for this. We sat with that for a moment, the specific understanding of 2 people who have just confirmed something they had each suspected, and neither had been certain of. What do you want to do? I asked. Zoe was quiet for a moment. Then she said something I have thought about many times since. I want him to feel what he made you feel, what he's making me feel. I want it to be real for him, the way it was real for us. I understood that. I understood it exactly. Okay, I said. Let's figure out how to do that. Type yes in the comments if you would have said exactly the same thing. Zoe and I spent 3 weeks building what I can only describe as an archive. I had kept things, not deliberately, not with a plan. I had kept them the way people keep things when something feels off and they don't yet know what to do with the feeling. Text messages that showed the pattern of reality replacement. Emails where my account of events had been systematically reframed. Notes I had made to myself in the first year. A habit I had developed almost without knowing why, writing down what had happened after it happened, as if I were building a record against a dispute I couldn't yet name. Zoe had 6 months of material, less than me, but focused and recent, and she had something I did not have. She had audio. 3 conversations recorded on her phone during moments when the gaslighting had been so overt that she had known, even in the moment, that she would need to be able to prove what she had heard. She had not known why she would need to prove it. She had known that she would. We organized everything together. My 4 years and her 6 months, arranged in chronological order and by pattern. The specific tactics Ryan used, documented across 2 relationships, visible as a system when seen from the outside, in a way they had not been visible from the inside. It was when it was assembled, devastating. Not because any single piece was dramatic. None of it was individually dramatic, which was precisely the point. Gaslighting does not look like abuse from the inside because it is designed not to. It looks like your own inadequacy. It looks like your failure to remember correctly, to perceive accurately, to respond proportionately. The system only becomes visible when you can see it across time and across multiple targets. We could see it now, all of it. And what we were looking at was a method applied with consistency over at least 5 years. The 4 I had spent in the relationship and the 6 months before that, when Zoe had been the target. We decided not to go to anyone formally, not to the police, not to an HR department, not to any institutional structure. What Ryan had done was wrong and damaging and possibly, in some technical sense, actionable. But the legal route would be long and expensive and uncertain and would require us to spend more of our time and energy on Ryan than either of us wanted to give. What we decided to do instead was social, precise, targeted, and absolutely unstoppable once it began. We identified the people who mattered. Not everyone, not the acquaintances and peripheral contacts who had received Ryan's version of events and would likely receive ours with equal skepticism. The people who mattered, the close friends, the professional colleagues, the people in Ryan's life whose opinion he valued and whose trust he had built carefully over years. We wrote to them, not together, separately, independently in our own voices. We told our own stories. We included the documentation where it was relevant. We did not coordinate the language because we did not need to coordinate the language. The language was the same because the experience had been the same. Don't go anywhere. Because the response to those messages is the part of this story that finally made Ryan understand what it felt like to have your version of reality challenged. The messages went out on a Thursday. I want to be specific about what happened next, because specificity matters, and because the vague, everything fell apart version of revenge stories does not do justice to what actually happens when a carefully constructed social reality encounters documented truth. Ryan's closest friend, a man named Marcus, who had known him since college and who had received from Ryan the full version of my supposed instability, called Ryan on Friday morning. Marcus had received my message and Zoe's message within hours of each other. He had read the documentation. He had also, I learned later, called 2 other people in his and Ryan's shared circle and compared notes. The comparison had produced a conversation that had lasted 2 hours and had arrived at conclusions Marcus was now calling to share. I know what Marcus said because Zoe was with Ryan when the call came in and she heard his side of it. She texted me in real time, sitting in the next room, as Ryan's voice changed from its usual managed calm to something she had never heard before. Ryan tried the standard moves. He said I was doing exactly what he had warned them I would do. Making false accusations, creating chaos, trying to damage him out of spite. He said Zoe had been manipulated by me. He said the documentation was taken out of context. He said anyone who knew him knew that none of this was true. Marcus said, Ryan, I've known you for 15 years, and I'm looking at a text message you sent Nadia where you told her she was remembering a conversation wrong that I was also present for. And I remember that conversation, and she remembered it correctly. The silence that followed, Zoe told me, lasted almost 10 seconds. Marcus was not the only one who called that day. 3 other people from Ryan's social circle reached out to him in the 24 hours after the messages went out. Not all of them were confrontational. Some were simply asking questions in the careful way of people who have received information they don't know what to do with and want to understand. But the questions themselves were the point. Ryan had spent years being the person who asked questions and provided answers. He was now the person being asked questions, and the answers he had available did not hold up against documentation. At work, the situation developed more slowly. Ryan's professional circle was separate from his social one, and the messages had not been sent there. We had been deliberate about that. What happened professionally was not the result of anything Zoe or I did. It was the result of the social situation becoming known in the way that things become known in a mid-sized city's professional network, and of 2 colleagues who had mutual connections to both Ryan's personal and professional life, putting things together. Ryan's manager was not formally informed of anything. Ryan's manager began asking questions about a project that had been managed in ways that raised questions that had not previously been raised. The project review that followed was not related to what Zoe and I had done, except that it was, in the specific way that a man who has spent years managing perceptions is suddenly less able to manage them when his credibility has taken damage from a direction he cannot address professionally. He did not lose his job. I want to be clear about that. He kept his position and his salary and the structural apparatus of his professional life. What he lost was the smooth, managed surface of it. The ease of being believed, the benefit of the doubt, the specific social capital that he had been spending for years on constructing a version of himself that the documentation had now complicated. He lost the narrative, and for a man who had built everything on narrative, that was the thing that cost him most. Zoe left him 3 weeks after the messages went out. She did this on her own terms and her own timeline, having gathered herself sufficiently to do it in the way she wanted, with clarity and without apology, and with the specific confidence of someone who knows exactly what she is walking away from. Ryan did not take it well. He tried, briefly, to deploy the familiar tools, the patient concern, the gentle explanation that she was making a mistake, the suggestion that she was being influenced by someone whose perception could not be trusted. The tools did not work. Zoe had spent 3 weeks comparing notes with someone who had seen those exact tools used in exactly that way, and she was not susceptible to them anymore. She walked out. She did not look back. I want to say something about gaslighting because the word gets used loosely, and the loose usage obscures what it actually is and how it actually works. Gaslighting is not someone disagreeing with you. It is not someone having a different memory of an event. It is not someone being wrong about what happened or being defensive when challenged. These things are frustrating and sometimes relationship-ending, but they are not gaslighting. Gaslighting is a sustained, deliberate practice of replacing another person's perception of reality with your own, of convincing them through consistent repetition and the specific exploitation of their trust that their own mind cannot be relied upon. It is not an accident. It is not carelessness. It is a choice made repeatedly by someone who understands what they are doing and has decided that their own convenience or control is worth more than the other person's sanity. Ryan knew what he was doing. I believe that now, in a way I was not certain of while I was inside it. The preparation, the advance work of telling Zoe about my instability before she had any reason to doubt me, the preemptive poisoning of the well, and is not something an accidental manipulator does. That is strategy. That is someone who understands the system they have built and is protecting it from the specific vulnerability he knew it had. A previous target who could compare notes. He was right to be concerned about that vulnerability. He was wrong to think he could neutralize it by telling Zoe I was crazy, because telling Zoe I was crazy with such specificity, with such advanced preparation, with such clear anxiety about the possibility of contact. Told her exactly what kind of person she was dealing with. It told her that I was someone he was afraid of, and she was smart enough to wonder why. What I want to say to anyone watching this who is in a version of what I was in, who is in a relationship where their memories are consistently wrong and their perceptions are consistently unreliable, and the person across from them is consistently the patient, concerned authority on what actually happened, is this. Write things down, not because you're planning to use it, because the act of writing it down in real time before the explanation arrives to replace your perception is how you hold on to what you know. Keep a record. Date it. Be specific. The record is not for anyone else. It is for you, for the version of you that will need someday to be able to look at something and say, I was right. I saw what I saw. It happened. And if someone tells you that the person who came before you was unstable, was difficult, was not to be trusted, consider the possibility that what you are being told is the advance work of someone protecting a system you have not yet fully seen. Nadia was not crazy. She had never been crazy. It took me 3 weeks of documentation and a Thursday's worth of messages and the sound of Ryan's voice changing on the phone to finally know that completely, in the part of me where certainty lives. But I knew it from the moment Zoe said, the things he says you did, I think they're the things he did. That sentence, that was the moment. Some moments are worth waiting for. It is February now, 18 months since I left, 10 months since Zoe called. My apartment is still mine, still organized according to my system, still furnished with the things I chose, still the specific quietness of a space that belongs entirely to one person who likes it that way. I have a plant on the windowsill that has survived the Minnesota winter, which feels like an achievement worth noting. I went back to therapy for 3 months after Zoe's call. Not because the call destabilized me, but because it surfaced things I had not fully processed, and I wanted to process them properly, rather than carry them. The therapist is a woman named Dr. Park who does not let me get away with easy answers, which is exactly what I need and occasionally find aggravating. Zoe and I talk every few weeks. We have become, in the specific way of people who have shared something significant and emerged from it, friends, real ones. Not the circumstantial kind. She is doing well. She is in a different relationship now, a careful one, with someone she met through her own network rather than Ryan's. She says she notices different things than she used to. I understand that. Ryan is still in Minneapolis, still at his company, still in the social world we had shared. Still, as far as I know, Ryan. People do not transform because they have been documented. What they lose is the specific ease of the untested version of themselves, and Ryan has lost that. The surface is the same, the ground under it is different. I do not think about him often. When I do, I think about the Tuesday evening in April when Zoe called, and the specific sensation of something settling that had been unsettled for years. And the understanding that arrived in 3 seconds that I had not been wrong. I had never been wrong. I had been told I was wrong so many times by someone so skilled at telling it that I had almost stopped being able to tell the difference. Almost. If this story found you somewhere you needed it, if you recognize something in the quiet erosion or in the record that saved you or in the phone call you did not expect, leave a comment. Tell me where you are. And if you are currently inside something that feels like this, if your memories are consistently wrong and your perceptions are consistently unreliable and you have stopped trusting what you see, write it down tonight. Just one thing with the date. Start there. Subscribe for new stories every week. See you next time. All stories on this channel are fictional narratives created for entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real persons, companies, or events is coincidental. This content is intended to explore themes of gaslighting, recovery, and the power of two people comparing the truth.